I just bought the tablet that Apple should have made. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I have in my hand an awesome little tablet. I haven't even unboxed it yet, and I don't know if this thing is actually garbage. I bought it with my own money, but I am telling you that this is the tablet that is pushing the future of tablets. And it may not be the perfect execution on it, but in my opinion, this is the tablet that Apple should have been working on. If Tim Cook wanted to be the next Steve Jobs, this is what he should have been pushing for. This is a color e-ink tablet. Now, it's not the first color e-ink tablet to ever exist, but it is a color e-ink tablet that is finally making color e-ink tablets a practical solution for a lot of people. So why I picked this up was for a number of reasons. First of all, I like the iPad. I've had iPads in the past. I still have like a 6-year-old iPad mini that I use very infrequently. But to me, that's not really as valuable as it once was. Phones are getting bigger, and so I use my iPhone for a lot because it's the max size. It's actually kind of like a little tiny tablet. So what I don't want is just another tablet that's slightly bigger, that's slightly better. What I want is a tablet that I can use outdoors, that has amazing battery life, that is easy on the eyes. And so I have been pushing for color e-ink forever. Now this company, BOOX, BOOX, makes this. It's the Nova 3 Color 7.8 inch color e-ink tablet, and I am super stoked about this, even though I paid full retail for it, because I was looking at this. And now there have been a number of companies that have been working on color e-inks to various levels of success, and that is to say, not a lot of success. One, the colors aren't usually that vibrant. They certainly don't refresh very fast. So if you have ever used an e-ink tablet, you know that sometimes it flickers, especially as you're changing pages in a book. And so color e-ink is certainly not going to be very good for most of the quick swiping, but is certainly not watching videos. That's why I was so excited about this, because it looked like I could potentially play videos on this, read books, see charts, read graphs, surf web pages, read PDFs, look at photos, all on a color e-ink screen. So we are going to try that out, and if you are watching this video, I can just tell you that this video is going to be excruciatingly long, because if you want just a high-level, quick review of this thing, this ain't going to be the channel for it, because I have never had any device like this. I am going to go into all of the details because I think you are dying to know what this is like. Now, it does come with some other accessories. You can see here I had a screen protector fall out as I unboxed it, and here is the color e-ink tablet itself, wrapped in plastic. And this is not, as far as I can tell, some sort of overlay. This is actually the color e-ink screen active. So it must have a no power mode when it creates the image here. And again, I won't say this is super vibrant, but what this is this is a game changer over e-ink, right? Because most e-ink can do some black and white, grayscales. It kind of reminds me of the early stages of laptops, where all you could get were grayscale laptops. I remember I had a TFT laptop that only did black or red, and then I got a grayscale screen laptop, and then I remember getting a grayscale screen laptop that would do up to 64 shades of gray, which was amazing, because then you could actually start rendering things like photos. And then I got my first color laptop, and this is kind of what it reminds me of. The colors weren't super bright, super vivid. The DPI wasn't great. In fact, if you use this in the black and white, I think you will get 300 DPI. But in the color e-ink mode here, it's only 100 DPI. Now, that's all stuff that I think will evolve over time, but 100 DPI in color e-ink I think is just fine for me for most of my everyday use. Now, I will say here, right out of the gate, I'm pretty impressed. If this is how it ships, with the power off and a static color picture on the front, that's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited. Now, I will say this thing is about iPad mini size. It's kind of Amazon Fire HD 8 size. I can palm it here. I have pretty medium-sized hands, but you can see I can just get it in my hand, which is really nice, because if I'm sitting around and reading it like this, it's nice to have my whole hand around it as opposed to just clamping onto the bezel, which just doesn't feel secure. So this is really about the right size. You can see that the bezel on the top is a little larger. The bezel on the bottom is the largest. We do have a little button right there, and then we have some pretty small bezels right there. Now, one of the things that happens here, and I hope I have this information right, but I am not a techie, but I think there's like a black and white level of e-ink, and then on top of that, there's like this color substrate, and then on top of that is the touchscreen material itself. So what ends up happening is the colors look a little muted because they're underneath other materials. And they're also set down a little bit. If you are using kind of one of the high-end color tablets right now, you're probably used to that panel being the top layer, and so it looks really good. This is going to look like it's sunk down a little bit more. That's kind of my understanding. I think the chassis here is all plastic. It's got a little bit of a matte finish. I wouldn't call it slippery or slick, but I do like the fact that it kind of hides the smears without looking like a total matte finish. It has a little bit of a curve to it. Kind of feels like an iPad 2. You can see that the edges are rounded, but it doesn't really bow out, and it's very light. It's lighter than the comparable iPad mini as far as I can tell. Also on the bottom here, what we have is a USB-C port, which is great. I love the fact that it's using the latest in cables. It looks like we have a little speaker grill right here on the bottom. I mean, it's like a quarter of the size of a postage stamp, so I'm really curious to see how that works. We are gonna do some video tests here. We're gonna try to stream some video, so I can tell you that that's coming. And then up on the top, it looks like we have your power button right there. So all of that is right there, but man, dude, I'm stoked, man. I have a color e-ink tablet in my hand. For me, something like this is really meant to just consume information, consume videos, to do a little reading. And most of us that are doing that just for fun want it to be easy on our eyes, or you want to sit outside. Now, I certainly have been able to read my iPad outside, but something like this might mean that you can go days, weeks, maybe even months without having to charge it, so you don't have to worry about power. If you're using an iPad regularly, you have to charge that by the end of your day. Not the end of 24 hours, but the end of your day. So that is a major game changer. But then secondly, this might actually be easier to read outdoor in bright sunlight, and we are going to test that. We are going to test that here. I'm getting a little slap happy. So rest of the box here. Looks like we have some materials back here. The USB to USB-C cable right there for charging. Here is the stylus for this. This is actually really important, and this is something that I think is also potentially a game changer. So now, not only is it for consumption, but I can write, take some notes, draw some pictures on here. And what I'm really interested in trying out here is seeing how you save those. So I've seen some demonstrations of people doing that, but how do you save those? Can you save them to your Google Drive? Can you save them to Dropbox? Can you email them out? You know, does it save them in different formats? So we're going to try that out here. This little stylus here is plastic. It is very, very light. We have a little clicking button on the back end here and kind of a little, looks like plastic stylus nib up there. So that's really cool. I wish that this would stick to the tablet somewhere. So I might have to see if I can find a tablet cover with this. Okay, so I should have just looked in the rest of the box, because look at this. It says Books Nova cover, and it's actually pretty nice looking packaging. So far, I'm really impressed. All this is like a premium type of packaging, and when I talk about the price, that's also where I'm actually pretty impressed. So I didn't order any of this with it, so I can't tell you if this always comes like this, or if you're ordering early, maybe it's just included, but I would think that maybe all this is included. But we do get a little cover here. It does have that little pen loop right there, so it looks like I could put the stylus right in here. I will tell you, this is some sort of a urethane material. It looks like gray linen. It's got a nice feel. It's kind of tacky, but it doesn't feel like cloth. It has the Books logo right there, but that looks pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty sharp looking thing. This would certainly fit in any professional environment. And then if I open this sucker up, what we have here is kind of a plastic hard case. It's a little bit of a smoked gray, obviously translucent. So what we could do here is pop this in here, have your stylus with you. I really like it. It also looks like the way this hinge works, that this will go all the way around without any problem. It looks like it's designed to do that. So you could absolutely continue to use this and have that feel like it's a tablet without having to have it open like a book. We also get this little box here. Oh, so we get some extra marker tips. So maybe those stylus tips wear out, but man, we get at least 5 more stylus tips right here. Looks like we have a little bungee cord, so I think this is for putting on your stylus and then hooking it onto the case so that you potentially don't lose that stylus, but then it kind of allows you to use the stylus because this really stretches. It kind of reminds me of like the security chains on bank pens. It's like the banks, they make so much money, but they don't want you to take their pens, for crying out loud. I'm going to go ahead and set this up. I'm going to download any apps that come with it, but I will tell you right out of the gate, I am super stoked about this thing. So why I picked this up is because I saw that this came out. I know that it wasn't perfect. It's not exactly like watching video on this thing is going to be best video experience. It's probably not even going to be passable for most people, even using a low-end Chromebook or something like that. But what I really wanted to see is, can I watch video at all? You know, there are times when I'm trying to watch a webinar or trying to watch a recording, and I don't need really good high quality, high definition video, but I just need to see generally what's going on. So even if the video is kind of choppy, that's okay to me because it allows me to consume and review some content that I wouldn't be able to otherwise on an e-ink tablet. So even though this might muddle through some of the things that are really easy for kind of premium color tablets, if this can do it, if this can kind of power through it, then this would be a really good companion for me, because in a pinch, then I would still be able to use this for those types of tablet tasks. But in most cases, I'm just using it to review documents and to create written content and to check email. So what I really want to do here is have access to a web browser, to have access to drawing tools, to read some books, to read documents, and then maybe consume internet-based information in video or audiobooks and things like that as well. And it really looks like this is the best color e-ink option out there. And I thought it might be kind of expensive, and I thought, you know what, if it's around $350, that's a no-brainer. That would be a great price. And so I went to the website, and I think it was like $415. So it's very close. And now that I've unboxed it here, not only do I get the tablet, which is really the only thing that I was expecting to get, but you get the case and stuff with it too. So if I were expecting just the tablet and feeling like just this alone is a fair price at $350, to get the stylus, which can easily be another $30 or $40, $50, to get the case, which can easily be another $20 or $30, to get all of that, I think the $420 price point makes a ton of sense. The other thing that sold me on this was that it's running some sort of skin version of Android. So it's not a proprietary operating system like some of the other tablets that I have checked out in the past, like Remarkable, where they just say, hey, our tablet is just meant to do certain tasks, and we are building just that functionality in there and nothing else. Something like this might give me access to the Google Play Store, even maybe have to sideload some stuff on, but it allows me to have something that can potentially run some stuff that otherwise I would never be able to run. So I'm going to get this set up. I'm going to try this out, and then we are going to get back together, and I'm going to give you all of the excruciating details on this. All right, so I have been using this BOOX Nova 3 color tablet for a while, and I have lots to say on it. So if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, stick with me because this is going to be a long video. First of all, I just want to compare it to this iPad mini. This is the 4, I think. This is about 5 or 6 years old right now, but I still have it because it still works, and I just want to show you here. It's almost exactly the same size. It's about the same length. It is just about the same width, and this with this is about the same heft if this has the case on it. So this has some, standard weight, but this is maybe just a smidge heavier, but with the case. Without the case, it's lighter, so that's pretty cool. I don't want to open it up yet because that's part of what I want to talk about. So let's get into this. I'm going to try to show you as much detail about this as I possibly can. First of all, when you get this bad boy and you turn it on, first thing you should do is go to the settings and update the firmware. The firmware download is like a gig, so it takes a while to download. It takes longer to download than it does to install, so you'll have to go up and do that. And then you will also have to calibrate the stylus here. So it actually reminds me of a Palm Pilot. What ends up happening is that it puts little X's on the screen and you have to tap right in the center of them. And so you'll have to do that too to calibrate the stylus, but it reminds me of the Palm Pilot. Not a big deal. It just takes a minute to do that. Now, before we get into the tablet itself, I do want to mention this cover here because I really like it. Shows some fingerprints right there, but what it does is it has this little hump where the material is mounted inside the plastic, and it's actually pretty nice because when you're carrying this like this, it gives you a little ridge to put your fingers on. It's actually really comfortable. It's nice and smooth, so it feels good in the hand. And when you open it, it is magnetic, so it does kind of want to stay closed a little bit, but when you open it up, it will power on the tablet. Now, one of the things that I will tell you here, and we'll get into this, is that you can install the Google Play Store, and I really like that because that's a game changer. That is really what made me decide to get this, because I could put applications on here and make this actually useful for me. However, Google Play has a security policy that requires a tablet to be password protected, and so what you'll notice here is that even though I've opened it up to use it, it's taking me to this password protection screen, so I have to put in a code. Now, that's not unlike starting up an iPad, and maybe you have Face ID, so it's really easy, but on many of these you have to enter a passcode to get into them. It's just nice because a lot of those have streamlined it so that it's your thumbprint or your face or whatever. You do have to input the code here. Now, the other thing that I will say here is that I wish it would just recognize that the passcode has been put in completely and try to submit it and open up. You can see here I've got the passcode in, but it's not letting me in because I actually have to hit this little checkbox right there, and now it will let me in there. So it would be an improvement, in my opinion, if it would actually just recognize that you've entered the passcode. Like on this iPad, once you hit all the characters for the passcode, it will just log back in. So that's kind of disappointing, but I understand why it does that. Now, the other thing I will say about this is that you do want to change, at least I do, the power settings when you have this cover on. And that's because if I go here into settings and then over here to power, what you'll notice is that we really have two different power settings, auto sleep and power off. Now, power off is obviously pretty obvious. That's like powering down, so that's like shutting down. But the auto sleep is like hitting the button on this iPad. So if I just tap this power button right up here on this iPad, basically it just kind of locks it, right? If I hold it down, it'll go into a total power off state. So I can actually swipe to turn this completely off. So that's powering off, and that's auto sleep. Now, the difference here is that this power off was set to 15 minutes by default. So what ends up happening here is that when you close this, it goes into auto sleep, which is fine. But then if you open this up 20 minutes later, it's already powered down. So you're going back to this power button and turning this thing back on. And of course, it's not a super fast processor, so it takes, maybe a minute to boot all the way back up. And it's just an inconvenience when a lot of times during the day, you'll probably close it and go 20, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours without using it and powering it back up. I get it's for power saving, but it's just a little annoying, to be really honest. So by going to this power off timeout after 2 hours instead of 15 minutes, now when I close it, it will just kind of hibernate it, and so when I come back in, I can just put in the passcode and it's ready to rock, right? So I'd like that. So change those power settings. Now, as you were able to see here, the cool thing about this screen is it is a touch screen. So that is really impressive because sometimes these e-ink screens are not. So it works just like a regular tablet for the most part. Now, I love having the touch screen here because then I wasn't sure if I was going to have to do everything with the stylus. Now, I will say because of the way this refreshes and it's a little slow, there tends to be a lag, but it tends to register my inputs pretty quickly and correctly. So if I go here to date and time, see, it registered my tap there correctly, but it just took a second to react to it. I bring that up because let's say I go to type something in, right? So instead of ESPN, I want to go to Shinola. The issue here is that I think what ends up happening is you don't see it appearing as quickly as you think it should. And so what I've noticed is that sometimes you linger on the button, and I've gotten double inputs because you're like, oh, I don't know, did it register that M? And so you're kind of holding it because you think it's going only as fast as you're typing, but it's not. So you can actually type just about as fast as you can on any tablet, but just kind of ignore what's rendering on the screen, knowing that it is registering all your inputs, because if you don't do that, you just get double entries, you get a long press, those types of things, and you're getting a little preview of what this looks like in the color mode. So once you get used to that, typing emails, typing responses, typing in documents just gets way, way easier. And unlike the iPad, the refresh here is a little slow. Now, you can absolutely speed up the refresh or kind of optimize it for moving video and page turns and actual video. I'm going to show all that to you, and it's pretty impressive, but you're going to kind of want to toggle between the page refresh modes kind of diligently when you need them. Okay, so let's just talk about the colors here. The colors are somewhat muted, but this thing is a color e-ink, as you can see here. It's pretty cool, man. I mean, this looks kind of burnt. It actually kind of looks like you're looking through an Instagram filter in some ways, but what I love is that you get that color representation without it just being either one black or white or grayscale, right? In fact, if I were pulling up my auto blog here to see some cars, you can see that it takes a little time to render things. I can tell if the car's blue or green or yellow. It's pretty cool. Like, this is a white Land Rover that's available here. I have never really seen anything like this before. For example, If you look at this ad, you can tell that's a red Nissan in that ad. So it's pretty nice. But everything tends to look just a little bit muted. Now, if I go back to the Shinola website here, what I want to show you is that we can adjust some of these. So we have this watch here, and I'm going to put it down on the bottom of the screen. Just like this. This is probably where it's worth mentioning the scrolling, is that because it doesn't refresh as quickly as other screens, as you're scrolling it, it works and it registers your input, but obviously when I move like that, it takes a second for it to get back to where I am, scrolling to and from, right? Now if I swipe down, this brings up this control panel where now I can go to this display control and I can control color contrast, color saturation, and color brightness. Now I will say here that most of these should probably just be turned down. I actually thought I would crank them all the way up and that would make it look the best. Color contrast is a little weird in that it just makes things like black and white photos if you go all the way up. To be really honest, the color contrast way down. Color saturation, again, I thought this would make it look vibrant, but it kind of makes things look a little muddled, and it's probably a little hard to show you here. Now if I go to color saturation and I move it all the way down, I think the sharpness is better here. And if I move it all the way up, what we get is like this blobbing, and it's kind of reminds me of when you just oversaturate a picture in a photo. To be honest, down on the lowest level there seems to be kind of about right. Now color brightness, this is where I felt like if you turn this up, that's not really a problem. If I turn it down, I haven't really seen a big difference here. But again, by moving everything down, I just think the picture accuracy is like the best. I mean, it just tends to look good, but it just tends to look washed out, like a magazine that's been out in the sun for a really long time. Now, I also will say that at least in this Chrome browser, we do have pinch to zoom. Again, it takes a little bit longer there to refresh, but it's nice because we have that. We don't have that in every other place of the tablet, which is kind of disappointing, but I understand why it does that. So the color here reminds me of early color laptops. Honestly, I remember when they released color graphing calculators, and there's something about that that is very similar. It's just an early generation of color. There is color, but it's certainly not vibrant. You certainly would not confuse this with a printed magazine page. Now, I will say at some point in the future, and maybe we'll be alive when that happens, but I think color e-ink tablets will look like a piece of printed colored paper. I mean, they will look like a brochure in your hand. So this is just kind of an early stage of getting there, all right? So you'll also see, and it may be a little hard to see here, but you will also get a little bit of ghosting. What we can see here is just a little bit of these streaks across the screen where there is the image from, say, the previous web page, and that is because of the nature of e-ink. So sometimes there are ghosting, and the ghosting can be either subtle or pronounced, and the way you get rid of that, I think, and I'm not an e-ink expert, is that you refresh the whole display. And so what you do here, when we get into the video portion, you want to change how often it refreshes, because that will get rid of like the ghosting piece and how long they hang out there. And so if you really want a clean page, you want that refresh to be really frequent. But if you want to have really smooth movement, video and page turns and things like that, you don't want it to necessarily refresh. You want it to kind of just paint the picture over and then wait for a static page to refresh it so that you don't notice it. All right, so that's kind of my understanding of it, but you will see the ghosting here. And I've noticed that, when I've left this on a single picture like this for a while and I go to something else, I will tend to see some of the little ghosting elements. Now I do want to show you here, if I go up here, that I do have this on the normal mode. So this is kind of the most common mode. It's for having as clean of a canvas as possible. It's really for just reading and consuming information like books or EPUBs or PDFs, that kind of thing. So when we get into the other ones, I'll show you some of the other modes. So the other thing I want to tell you here is that this has a front light. Now we can get there. These are the brightness settings for the device, and I can toggle this off and on. And what you can see here is that I think what it does is indoors it makes it readable. This looks brighter, the page looks whiter with that light on, and in fact I can adjust the brightness. You can see that going up like that, and then I can just toggle it off. Now the toggling off is when you have a really strong backlight source. Now the funny thing to me is where I'm sitting here in my studio, I actually have pretty good lighting, and what this looks like with the front light off is just kind of a washed out, a little bit gray, a little bit dull, and so almost always when I'm inside, I've noticed that I want that light on, okay? And that just makes it easier to me to see. Now, when we go to the outdoor portion, I think that's where you can obviously have this turned off. And if you're in a really bright area, maybe you just don't want as much front light. You know, if you're laying in bed or in a dark room, you could probably get away with very little. But obviously, when there's no light being produced by the tablet like this, in a dark room, you can't read this. It's like having a piece of paper. You can't read that either. Indoors, you don't necessarily have to have this on, but it always has made it more readable to me. All right, the other thing I want to show you here is that this capacitive touch is pretty nice, and it does register things even with a pretty light tap. I think if your fingers are oily or wet, you know, it's that capacitive nature to register that when it's a little bit better. But what I've noticed here is that sometimes you really have to go at the touch, like there, right? So sometimes, you know, I press with authority, almost like it's a resistive touchscreen, even though I believe it's a capacitive touchscreen. And I'm not sure if that's the delay in it, it's more mental, but I just feel like sometimes it doesn't register my touch, just like there. And so I just am really diligent about touching it, even more so than I am on like an iPhone or an iPad or an Amazon Fire tablet, those types of things. The other thing that I will say, and I think this is the drawback to the fact that you can't render every color here, is that sometimes there are these menu bars and sometimes there are these menus, and they have like the hamburger or something and it's white on gray and they're really subtle, and it can be hard to find some of these things sometimes. So this isn't necessarily a great example. You know, it's maybe more pronounced in some of the Google apps. Now, what does it look like to read a PDF? So I went ahead and I downloaded a PDF, and if you go to here to storage, you can download it to its hard drive. You can see, even though I downloaded a bunch of apps, looks like I still have a decent amount of space here. If I go into documents, looks like this is the default place. Downloaded an old issue of Maxim magazine because I thought this would be interesting to see what this looks like. Now, if I go all the way back to the first page here, it's a really nice form factor for reading magazines, like the print magazines. You can see that the cover here takes up everything. Again, the colors aren't perfect, but you can obviously see the colors that are meant to be represented here. If we go to this ad, it looks like there's a Jim Beam ad here, and you know, all of that looks pretty good. I mean, it's just muted, right? Even the bright white screen here. Hillary Duff's getting some love in this issue. You can see the blue and the white here on the screens, and you know, it's just it's good. Like here, where we have a lot of subtle colors, this purple, this red, this green, yellow, and blue, I can make all those out. It's registering in my mind. It's certainly not as vivid and bright as it would be on a color tablet, but over a black and white that's trying to render this with like grayscales and things like that, I would never know what color swimsuit or top she has on, right? Those types of things. So I really like this. Now, I will say, if I turn this like this, what you'll notice is the image does not turn. This does not have an accelerometer. That's one of the reasons that we hit this particular price point on it. So it doesn't turn when you want to look at it in a different format. Now, I want to show you here a little quirk. If I go down here, what I can do here is I can select the orientation of the screen. It gives me the little tablet represented with these T's in the direction that the image will be. Now, I'll be honest, this is not that confusing right now, but it gets confusing when you start rotating. So I think that this is upright, and I think that this will turn it this way. So I'm going to just tap that, and now it's going to turn it. Now, one of the issues here with this is now I've got the Maxim magazine like this, but I want to show you, I'm trying to pinch down to get the full page in there, and it's not. Now, I actually can go into the settings here and switch this to the 2-page view, but it would just be nice if I'm on this page that I can do some of the zooming with pinch and zoom. I can't do that, but I can scroll like this. Now you can see how jumpy that is, and the other thing that I've noticed is it doesn't allow me to kind of scroll intermediate in the page. It only allows me to look either at the top or the bottom, right? And I can go to the next page, and again, top or the bottom, but it doesn't let me zoom or have finite control. So in this mode with the built-in reader, I would almost never want to read the PDF in the horizontal version. Now I want to go back here because I want to show you. I'm going to go back to rotate, and now I've got these, and I think I want to go back to this one, and nothing seemed to change. So I don't know why I'm confused about this, but I think that I want to rotate it this way. So I'm going to go to this button right there, and now we're back to vertical. Okay, so that's why it's confusing to me. It's not really obvious how those rotate. I would actually like it a little bit better if they just had rotate left or right, you know, just two, and then I could hit it twice if it's not in the correct mode. So especially here, so we have letters to the editor, and if I wanted to expand this up to read one of these, it would just be nice if I could do that. Nope, can't do it though. Okay, so keep that in mind. But you can certainly read PDFs on here, and that's just the default reader. You can maybe download some of the other apps from the Google Play Store to do that. It's certainly possible, so that might be nice. Now, I'm going to go back here because one of the other things that I was really wondering is, can I use this to take notes? Can I use this in a meeting? And if I go here to the Notes tab, I can absolutely do this. Now, one of the cool things about this is that I can go to add a notepad, and it gives me this page, and it works really well with the stylus. Works really well. It feels pretty good, and the responsiveness here is really great, and it actually looks like writing. And I'm going to assign Peter, and I'm going to put a little panda here, right? So we've got all of that right here. Now what ends up happening is I can go back, and now I have this page. I did this one yesterday. I have these two little documents, and if I hit this button, you can see actually it had a check mark there because it's syncing in the background because this sucker's connected to Wi-Fi. So obviously that's really important. Now if I weren't connected to Wi-Fi and then I turn this back on, it would try to sync once it's reconnected. But what I've done here is I've actually connected it to the Onyx Books Sync service. So they have their own iCloud account, and you can go up there and you can see these documents there, and that's pretty cool. Here is the website. This is the BooksICloud service, and you get this at push.books, BOOX.com, and then you have to sign up. It's kind of not the smoothest sign up process ever. You actually don't have a password. You actually have to request a PIN if you're logging in from a new device. So anyway, you get into the site here, and what we can do is you can see it's pretty simple. You can go here to recent notes, and if we look at Notepad 1, which was the first note that I did, and it will load it up over here, and you can see it says test 1. So we do have this image, and I can go here to download, and I can download it as a PDF or as an image. And if I go ahead and hit download, now I've got the PDF of what I wrote. So that's pretty cool. So if you take some notes, you can get the PDF of it. And if I pull up the second one, the one we just did, it looks like it works really well with my Panda and all that. So you've got all these up here. You can actually delete these two. So I don't need those, and it removes them from everywhere. So pretty nice little feature. Again, it's pretty simple. I think this is meant to be as simple as possible. It's meant to be a solution so that you don't have to go out and get an Evernote account or Dropbox account. It works fine. You just have to remember to go and bookmark this site, and that this is where you're going to generally get them, unless you're going to save them locally to the device in the documents folder and then copy those off somehow. So this is a little tour of the site. I like that, but I really wish they would allow me to sync it to, say, Dropbox and then create a dedicated books folder for it instead. I actually thought they might allow you to do that, and I actually went to settings, to accounts, and I actually went here, and they do have this Dropbox Sync here, and I could bind it to my Dropbox account. It looks like you have Evernote and OneNote down here, but for whatever reason, I haven't really found an obvious way that you send something to Dropbox. But if I go here to export, generating a file, it'll turn it into a PDF, and then it just puts it in the storage documents folder. So here it is. Now I would have to go in here and open it in my Dropbox app, which I've downloaded. So I don't really understand what binding my Dropbox service to the operating system here has done. You know, it seems like you're better off just downloading the Dropbox app or the Google Drive app or whatever we want to use, using this, exporting them as PDFs, and then uploading them there. So that is a little quirk that I still haven't figured out yet. But I love the fact that you can take some notes here. You can freehand it without having to type it, and I love the responsiveness and the feel of it, so that's pretty cool. I also have not put on the screen protectors that this came with. I will probably do that just to kind of make sure that this is protected, but I wanted to show it to you in its naked glory. Okay, now let's get on to the thing that was probably the most important for me. If I go down here to apps, you can see that I have a bunch of apps installed here, and that's because I have the Google Play Store. Now, the Google Play Store is on here, but it doesn't really work, and here's how you get it to work. So you have to go down to Settings, and you have to select Enable Google Play. That is not going to be enough. There's this GSFID thing that you have to tap, and that will allow you to log into your Google account. So once you do that, and you tap that, then you can go back here to apps, and then you can go to your Google Play Store, and it'll ask you to log in with your Gmail account. Once you do that, it looks like it's logged in, and then it asks me for some sort of like ID number, which I didn't have. So I actually just shut the whole thing down and turned it back on, and then went back to the Google Play Store, and it looked like it worked. Now from here, I can actually get into a variety of the apps that I want, right? So this is where I can download pretty much anything that I want. Now, as you saw, I was able to download the key and critical apps that I wanted. This Wise app here, I tap, and it looks like it's getting. But if I go up here to Chrome and I tap install here on Google Chrome, it never gets it. I've tried this a number of times. I have rebooted. I'm not sure why it won't install Google Chrome. It maybe is because they install their own web browser. But for me, I don't want just a web browser. I want the web browser that has my bookmarks and my logins already there, and Google Chrome has that. So I really wanted Google Chrome. So that was a big disappointment. However, I will say, if you look down here to Chrome Beta, right there, looks like there's kind of a beta version, and I did install that, and that seems to work pretty well. Again, and it might be kind of buggy, but it seems to work pretty well, and it gives me the Chrome features that I need. So if I go here to the ESPN website, seems to work just fine there. Ooh, who got traded? So you have to do a couple of things to get the Google Play Store working, but once you do, you can start downloading a bunch of these apps. Now, what works and what doesn't? Most of these apps look like they are on a smartphone, and most of them work. My AccuWeather, my Amazon, I'm going to get into some of the video ones too. Google Drive works, Dropbox, the eBay app, even Gmail, the Kindle apps work. So if you have your ebooks, they have their own store here so you can buy books, but I think for most of us, you're probably buying your books through a different account. So look, you can get to your library up here. Again, the scrolling might be slightly frustrating. I just downloaded this free Star Wars book. And again, the responsiveness of the touchscreen kind of confuses me sometimes, because sometimes I think I hit it with authority, and then I'm waiting to see if it registered, but obviously it didn't there. So now it does, right? And so now we get to the Star Wars book, and you can see this is what it looks like. And again, we're all in that standard refresh mode. So these look pretty good. You can see how it flickers a little bit as you go through the pages, but it's not bad, right? It's not bad. And then in here, do we have pinch to zoom? We do. So that's a function of the Kindle app more than anything else. Now, you can get all of these other apps, YouTube and all that stuff. I want to go into now video with this, because I am sure we're wondering, all right, color e-ink, that is one step. But refreshing any e-ink to play video has been a challenge, right? So I want to show you something here. I want to go into YouTube, and I'm going to leave it on mode 1, which is basically meant for using with ebooks. Now, I do want to show you here one of the issues, and I'm not sure why this is here, but you can almost never see thumbnails. So it's just the YouTube app, and I'm not sure why these pictures are all blown out. It's not just my thumbnails. They are thumbnails across the board, right? So look, I'm going to just hit this limited edition Pepsi Perfect bottle, and I want to just show you what this looks like in the normal mode. So you can see here, man, it is really, really smeared, right? I mean, it is just kind of flashing. It's kind of freaking you out, right? Okay, so I'm just going to hit pause here. Now I'm going to go back up here to our control panel, and instead of the normal mode, I'm going to go to speed mode. So this is where it should start smoothing things out. So I'm going to go to the speed mode, and now I want to show you the video again. And again, it's very, very stuttery, but at least now I can see things and it's not smearing the screen, right? Okay. And now I want to go to that A2 mode. And now this is going to have heavier ghosting, and it's going to be kind of the smoothest that it can be. What I think it's doing here is it's just repainting, and if it's not getting rid of what's underneath, you know, it's kind of two stages. It's got to paint to the screen, then it's got to remove the old screen. And if it just keeps painting, that allows it to be twice as fast, potentially, as opposed to erasing in the background. And so this is the smoothest it looks, but you might get the most number of artifacts and those things that kind of stay on the screen. So if I hit it now, again, a little flickering, but at least this video is usable as opposed to the earlier video, which was just smeared mess, right? All right, so let's go to some of the other video apps, and I want to show you what works and what doesn't work, okay? So if I go to Prime Video here, you might have a Amazon Prime account and you get video with it. It's probably going to get me demonetized. One, it will play. It always plays in landscape mode. Okay. And it looks pretty grainy. I think you can go and adjust kind of the default settings in Amazon, but I couldn't figure out where to do it. Now you can see a little bit of the ghosting right there. You could see where she wasn't erased from the previous image. But this is okay. It's, like I said, very much like early laptops. It works, but it's certainly not ideal. But I do like the idea that you can consume video content here on an e-ink screen. I think that's pretty crazy. So you can see the ghosting of the controls there. It takes a little while for you to get to a point where it's erased those out of the background. Okay, so in no way am I saying this is an amazing video watching experience, but it does work, okay? Now I want to go to Sling TV. Now I use Sling TV when I cut the cord from cable. Now what I want to show you here is what happens when we turn this on. So it looks like Bad Boys 2 is playing. If I hit watch, nothing ever plays. And what you can see here is down here, the counter thinks it's playing something, but it never plays. And I have never ever been able to get this to work. So for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a codec issue or something like that, but Prime Video works, Sling TV works, YouTube works, but nothing else does. We know YouTube works, but what about YouTube that is embedded into a web page? So if I just go to my web page here, again, kind of flickery, but it does play. So you might be thinking, hey, I surf the web a lot. Sometimes there's some embedded videos. You know, when I'm reading my car blogs or my tech blogs, sometimes they put in a little short video review or something like that. And you can absolutely play them there, and it works no better or worse than the native YouTube app itself. So that's kind of clever. All right, the other thing I want to show you here is that when I hit this little button here, this physical button, which we consider a home button in the iOS world, it takes me back to the app screen here because I really wanted a standard tablet-like experience. That button is a back button by default. So what you actually have to do here is go into more settings, and you actually have to go into applications. I'm not sure why it's there and not more settings, but you have to go here and set back button as a home button. So I've got that checked. So what it'll do is it will always go back to this main screen. The problem with the back button is that sometimes you've navigated far into something, and when I've hit this, thinking that it would go back out to the main screen, it just keeps going back, and I found myself hitting it 4 or 5 times to kind of get back to that home screen, and I wished I had a button that just would get me there. So set back as home button I think is a really good setting to use here. So I can go back there. So the other thing that you might notice is when I hit this home button, it goes back to this operating system, but it always goes to apps. So what you actually have to do here to do that is go to settings, more settings, and then custom homepage right here. You can set it to go to any one of these modules up and down the side. Now to me, it always made sense to go to the apps because that's what I wanted to navigate. You know, for the most part, I wasn't going to have things in the library. I didn't want to go to the store. I didn't even want to see the files that I have saved on here. For me, most of the time I wanted to go to apps. That's why I have that. So when I hit this little home button now, it always goes to my app screen because I think that makes it most tablet-like. Now, the most important thing and the real reason that we get e-ink, it is supposed to be much more superior to other tablets outside in bright sunlight for being able to consume information underneath direct light that might get washed out, that we might have to boost up the brightness on every other iPad, that might kind of stress it out, kill the battery life, maybe overheat it. So let's see how this thing works out in bright daylight. So it's a super bright and sunny day out here, and now we are going to check out what I think everyone is waiting to see. So first of all, I've gone ahead and powered it on, and I've turned off that front light that's right here. So I can toggle it on and toggle it off. We shouldn't need that while we are here out in the sunlight. So I've got the sun right over here, over my, I don't know if it's showing here, but my right shoulder. And if I punch up my auto blog here, go ahead and let that load. And what you can hopefully see here is that is pretty clear, man. Again, it's not like a paper white. There's just a little bit of like that blue-green tinge to everything. But look at this, man. I can sit out here in the bright sunlight, read my auto blog, see what's all new in the car world here. And I am not straining, I'm not cranking up brightness or anything like that. If I were to just pick this up and take a look at it like this, now I've got the sun directly behind me. Actually, I'm blocking it out with my camera here, but you can see that is perfectly readable. If I turn away from the sun, so I'm not in direct sunlight, now I've got the sun shining right in my eyes, and this is what it looks like too. And this is what it looks like here. So even with kind of the indirect light bouncing off of it or kind of just being reflected back onto that, no problems reading this. So here I can read about this nice McLaren that I'll probably never even see in person. But as you can see here, that is really easy to read even when the sunlight is in front of me. And I will tell you that, and then if I spin back around here with it directly behind me, you can see I can get a little glare of the sun off the tablet there too. But man, that is super easy to read. So this is where it shines. In pretty much with any of my other tablets, reading it in the sunlight would mean that I would be maxing out basically the brightness on the tablet and getting a lot of glare and having it still be almost unreadable. But this is obviously in its element here, so pretty awesome. And you can even see those colors. That is awesome. All right, the other thing I want to talk about here is battery life. So the battery life here is going to be based heavily on how bright you are running this front light. Now, I have been running it pretty bright here. I've been using it for a few days. I have charged it back up. And what I would say is, you can see it's at 66%. I would say that I can kind of get through all day using this thing and have pretty good battery life on it. If you go ahead and reduce the brightness of this back down to like 60 or 70%, I think it's reasonable to think that you're going to use 25-30% of this in a day under normal use, which means to me you can get 4 days of continuous use without recharging. That's certainly better than what I'm getting on my iPad mini, even on its best days. Now, if you are going to go ahead and toggle off the front light completely, this is just going to be an outdoor machine for you, then I think you are going to see some crazy battery lives. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you can charge this once a week, even on regular outdoor usage on this. Now, if you're consuming video that's playing audio that is continuously refreshing the screen, obviously that's going to affect it. I will also say that I'm actually pretty impressed with the speaker on this. It's not bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's loud enough and clear enough that I really haven't had any issues with it. So in summary here, one of the things that I really like about this is that it is kind of a really interesting tablet that fits a gap in my technology. I really love it. It doesn't have an accelerometer. It doesn't have physical volume buttons. I probably wouldn't mind that. I don't think it has a really high-end processor. It has kind of a minimum amount of onboard storage. It's plastic construction, but I think the price point on this is really great. And the most interesting thing about this is that it's doing something with e-ink that I have never seen done before. I know people are pursuing video on e-ink. I know people are pursuing more realistic, fully saturated, good representative colors on e-inks, and so I think that's going to get better and better. But for me, what I really don't need anymore, and that's why I haven't upgraded my iPad mini in 6 years, is really because I don't need an iPad mini. My phone on one hand is big enough to work almost as a phablet, so I can do most of my stuff there. It works great inside, it's always nice and bright. My computer on the other side is really great, and what I don't need is just a larger iPhone. What I need is something that's going to work for me in conditions where my iPhone or my laptop might not work. If you're out in bright sunlight and you've used an iPhone or a laptop, there's a couple things that happen. One, you have to usually crank up the brightness. And even when you do that, even when you get to max settings on some of those, it can actually be really hard to see. Oftentimes, the glare on those screens make them unusable as well. You just can't see anything. You're kind of bobbing your head around to keep glare or reflection out of the way. And the other problem, and I don't know if you've had this, but it certainly happened to me, is my iPhone won't power on sometimes because I get a heat warning, right? That the operating temperature, whether it's because it's in a case or under direct sunlight, won't even allow it to turn on. So it just waits to cool off. And obviously in direct sunlight, it's not necessarily going to do that very quickly. So this is something that I can take outside, and it's in its element when the lights are brightest, right? When the light is coming from another source other than the tablet itself. I mean, that's the beauty of e-ink. So this allows me to consume things in sunlight when I might just want to consume casually, right? You're sitting on your patio on a nice summer day, just wanting to read the news or surf some websites. Maybe you're on vacation, you want to sit and read your favorite book on a beach. Maybe you are working outdoors and you need to check email on a regular basis, and it's always hard to do it on a regular tablet. I think this fills a lot of the gaps that all the rest of the other technology out there doesn't. So I'm really impressed with this. To me, this is where I think companies like Apple should be innovating. I would go to a company like this and just buy the technology and then throw as much money and as many people as I can at it to move and advance this technology as rapidly as possible, to try to make up 5 years of development in the next year. Because if you had an iPad that had this screen on it, I would buy it. Despite all the foibles about it, despite the fact that it doesn't refresh as good as I'd want, it doesn't have the color saturation that I want. To me, the screen is the game changer, and I would pick it up because of that. So I am hoping that over the next year or two, we're going to see it even better. They're going to look even sharper, even more vibrant, even more colorful. They're going to stream, play video even smoother. And I think that ends up being a piece of technology that you can use in any condition. Obviously inside when it's front lit like this, or outside in bright daylight. So that I think is really, really awesome. And lastly, I will say that this is actually a fairly good deal to me. $419 for this whole thing. I thought just the tablet was $419, and I was pretty happy with that. I would say that because you get this cover, which is easily a $30 piece, and this pen I think is actually $30 if you want to reorder it. So you're getting $60 in accessories and the screen protector. I think it's actually a good deal. When you think about iPad mini starting at $300 or $400, with nothing, I think the iPad minis are a decent value too, but this one will do things that the iPad mini will not. And in fact, if you want to get the Apple Pencil, that's a $99 accessory. So the fact that I have my stylus here and can write and draw notes is pretty awesome. So, is it superior? No. Is it a step on the evolution of color e-ink? Yes. But it is far enough along in its current state that it adds real value to me. It gives me more freedom than some of my other devices do, and I'm really looking forward to using this thing over longer periods of time. So if you are looking for an e-ink tablet, even if it's not a color tablet, I think you should get this one. There's no reason to deprive yourself of the color if you can have it. And I think it's a screaming good deal, and I think it's going to keep pushing us forward in technology. If you want to pick up this or any of the other BOOX tablets, I'll put links to them in the description below. Peter Von Panda. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. Oh, that's going to be terrible.